I haven't opened Cursor in 3 months. Here's the open source terminal agent that replaced my entire coding workflow and why 7.5 million developers made the same switch. It's called OpenCode, 160,000 GitHub stars, 900 contributors, built by the team behind Serverless Stack. It's a terminal native AI coding agent that works with any model from any provider. Claude, GPT, Gemini, local models running on your own hardware. No subscription, no vendor lock-in, no code stored on someone else's servers. Now, why does this matter? Because vendor lock-in in AI coding tools is real and it has teeth. Claude Code only works with an Anthropic models. Cursor routes everything through Cursor servers. Copilot lives inside Microsoft's ecosystem. You're paying $20 a month to put your entire workflow inside a walled garden. And in January, Anthropic proved how fragile that arrangement is. They blocked OpenCode, Client, and raw code from using Claude subscription tokens overnight. No advance warning. Thousands of developers woke up to a broken workflow. The Hacker News thread hit over 1,000 points. The developer frustration was real. If your coding tool dies when one company changes its terms of service, you don't own your workflow. You're renting it. The irony is, what happened next? OpenCode removed all Claude OAuth code and moved on. OpenAI went the opposite direction. They officially partnered with OpenCode, giving ChatGPT Plus and Pro subscribers direct access inside the agent. Red Hat documented OpenCode for OpenShift dev spaces in April. The signal was clear. OpenCode isn't a workaround. It's infrastructure. OpenCode is the exit hatch. And here's what it actually does. It runs 3 ways as a terminal interface, a desktop app that's in beta on macOS, Windows, and Linux, or an IDE extension for VS Code and Cursor. You install it in about 60 seconds with a single curl command. It ships with 6 free models you can use immediately, no API keys, no accounts, no setup. If you want premium models, you authenticate once and you're done. It supports over 75 LLM providers. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Grok, Together, OpenRouter, Ollama for local models, LM Studio. You can swap between them mid-session without losing context. That's not something Claude Code or Cursor can do. There are 2 built-in agents. Build is the default. It has full access to read, write, and edit files and run shell commands. It's your main agent for feature development and refactoring. Plan is read-only. It analyzes your code and proposes changes without touching anything. You use Plan when you're exploring an unfamiliar code base or sizing up a refactor before committing to changes. You can also define custom agents, a review agent that only reads files and gives feedback, a migration agent scoped to database work, a security audit agent that checks for vulnerabilities. Each one is a config file, no code required. You describe what the agent should do and which tools it can access. That's it. The thing that separates OpenCode from every other terminal agent is LSP integration, language server protocol, the same code intelligence your IDE uses. Type information, go-to definition, diagnostics, references. OpenCode auto-detects and starts language servers for over 40 languages when they're installed on your system. Go, Python, TypeScript, Rust, C++, Java, Ruby, PHP. If your editor has a language server, OpenCode can use it. When the AI edits your code, it immediately checks for type errors, unused imports, and other issues, then fixes them in the same turn. Most agents treat your code base as plain text. OpenCode treats it the way your compiler does. That's a meaningful difference in edit quality, and it dramatically reduces the back and forth typical of AI coding tools. It also supports MCP servers, the Model Context Protocol. That means you can connect OpenCode to your database, your GitHub, your file system, any API you want. Configure a Postgres MCP server, and you can ask OpenCode to query your schema, analyze it, write a migration, and update your application code in the same session. Everything stays in context. Remote MCP servers are supported too, with OAuth authentication. Team shared tools like internal documentation, search, deployment triggers, monitoring dashboards. Everyone on the team accesses them through the same OpenCode config. Commit that config to your repo and every team member gets the same AI behavior. Here's what changed for me in practice. My monthly spend went from $40 across 2 subscriptions to near zero. I use free models for quick tasks, bug fixes, small refactors, documentation. I use premium models through API keys for complex work where reasoning quality matters. And I use local models through Ollama when I want everything running on my machine. No data leaves my network. Compliance teams can't object because there's nothing to object to. For teams working in regulated industries or anyone with data residency requirements, OpenCode plus Ollama is the only AI coding option that runs fully air-gapped. No internet, no third-party servers, no compliance headaches. Let me walk you through the actual workflow because the setup is shockingly fast. You install OpenCode with a single curl command. 60 seconds, you're done. Then you open it in your project directory and run the init command. OpenCode reads your entire code base and generates an agents.md file. It documents your project structure, patterns, and conventions. This becomes persistent context. You never have to re-explain your architecture every time you start a new session. The agents.md file gets committed to your repo, so every team member gets the same AI behavior automatically. Next, you run connect and authenticate with whatever provider you want. The OpenAI partnership means if you have a ChatGPT Plus or Pro subscription, you can use those models directly. GitHub Copilot users can log in with their existing accounts too, or just set an environment variable with your API key and OpenCode detects it automatically. Then you start building. I'll use a concrete game dev example. Say you're adding an inventory system to a game project. You tell the build agent what you need, item slots, stack limits, drag and drop, save and load to persistent storage. OpenCode reads your existing code, understands the patterns from the agents.md file, and generates the system. It writes the files, runs your build command, checks for compilation errors using the LSP integration, and fixes them before showing you the result. The whole cycle runs autonomously. You describe the outcome, it handles the implementation and verification. If you want to see how it would approach a tricky refactor before committing, you switch to the plan agent with the tab key. Plan reads everything, proposes a strategy, and explains the trade-offs. No files change until you say go. This is incredibly useful when you're evaluating whether to restructure your save system or replace your networking layer. Plan gives you an honest assessment without risking your code base. The multi-session support is where it gets powerful. I run 2 sessions side by side in Tmux. One session is debugging a rendering issue in my game's shader code. The other is building a new feature, maybe a procedural generation system. Each session has its own context, its own conversation history, its own model. They persist across restarts too. Close your terminal, open it tomorrow, and both sessions pick up exactly where you left off. When a conversation gets long, OpenCode auto-compacts it at 95% of the context window. It summarizes earlier messages, so you keep going without manual intervention. You can also share any session with a link. Your teammate opens it and sees the full conversation, the edits, the reasoning. No more screenshots of AI chat logs. And here's the part that convinced me to stop paying for Cursor. Mid-session, I can swap models, start with GPT for the initial feature build because it's fast and cheap. Switch to Gemini when I need a second opinion on architecture. Drop to a local Ollama model when I'm working on something sensitive, proprietary game logic, encryption code, anything I don't want leaving my machine. Same session, same context, same agent, no tool switching, no context loss. Try doing that in Cursor. You can't even use Claude and GPT in the same project without paying for both subscriptions. There's also a non-interactive mode that runs OpenCode from scripts and CI/CD pipelines. You pipe in a prompt, it outputs results to standard out. I use this for automated code review in GitHub Actions. Every pull request gets an AI review checking for security issues, performance problems, and bugs. It returns a non-zero exit code on failures, so you can gate your pipeline on the results. That's not a premium feature, it's built in. You can also pipe git diff output directly into OpenCode and ask it to review just the changes in a commit. One more thing worth mentioning, OpenCode has a permission system that controls what the AI can do. By default, it asks for confirmation before running potentially destructive operations. You can configure this per project. In development, I let it run freely. In production adjacent code, I set shell commands to require confirmation. You can also restrict file access, tell it to ignore your .m files, your secrets directory, your certificates. It respects gitignore by default, and you can add extra restrictions on top. When you're giving an AI agent full access to your code base, that control matters. Now let's be honest about the trade-offs, because this isn't a paid ad. Claude Code still leads on raw reasoning for complex multi-file backend work. If you're doing heavy architectural refactoring and you need the smartest model possible chained to a single ecosystem, Claude Code with Opus is hard to beat. Anthropic's models are genuinely excellent at multi-step reasoning. Cursor's visual IDE is smoother for front-end work. The inline diffs, the tab completions, the visual polish, Cursor nailed the editor experience. OpenCode is terminal first. If you hate the terminal, this isn't for you. The TUI is beautiful, built with Bubble Tea and Go, but it's still a terminal. No drag and drop, no visual file tree. But here's the thing. The terminal first approach is exactly why OpenCode is fast, composable, and scriptable. It runs anywhere, your laptop, a remote server over SSH, a Docker container, a CI pipeline. You can't SSH into a production box and open Cursor. You can't run Claude code in a Docker container without authenticating through Anthropic servers. OpenCode just works. And the flexibility is unmatched. You're not choosing between tools, you're choosing between constraints. OpenCode wins on cost, model freedom, privacy, and air-gap development. No other agent can run fully offline with local models. That's not a nice to have when your compliance team says no external code transmission. That's the only option. For shipping a game, this stacks up well. OpenCode plus Olama gives you fully local, fully private AI coding, no internet required. Works on a plane, in a cabin, anywhere. The agents.md file becomes living documentation for your entire project. Architecture decisions, coding conventions, testing patterns. When you add a new system to your game, you update the agents.md and every future session already knows about it. MCP servers connect to your game's database, your asset pipeline, your CI/CD. You build the same way in production that you prototype. That consistency matters when you're a solo developer or a small team trying to ship without burning out. Here's a concrete game dev scenario. You're building a roguelike and you need a procedural dungeon generation system. You open OpenCode in your project. The agents.md file already knows you're using a component-based entity system, that your game loop runs at 60 frames per second, that your maps use a tile-based grid. You tell the build agent to create a dungeon generator with room placement, corridor connections, enemy spawn points, and loot tables. It reads your existing map formats, creates the generator, writes unit tests for the room placement algorithm, and runs the build. The LSP integration catches a type mismatch in your tile coordinate system and fixes it before you even see the error. Total time from prompt to working code, maybe 5 minutes. Then you switch to the plan agent and ask it to analyze whether your generator will create valid maps at every dungeon level. Plan reads the code, identifies a potential edge case where corridors can overlap at level boundaries, and proposes a fix. You review the proposal, approve it, switch back to build, and say implement the plan. Done. And here's something I didn't expect. The model freedom actually made me a better developer. When you can swap models instantly, you start noticing what each one is good at. GPT is fast and solid for boilerplate. Gemini is surprisingly good at architectural analysis. Local models force you to write better prompts because they're less forgiving. You learn the strengths and weaknesses of each model by using them side by side on the same project. That's education you can't get from a single vendor tool. Inside AI Craft, we're using OpenCode workflows like this every day, the agent setup, the local model switching, the multi-session development. Come join the community and see how it fits into shipping real games. Please feel free to subscribe and check out the links in the description below.